It's time now for a look through the day's newspapers. Alison Sargent is in studio to do that with us now. Alison, good to have you with us. You're starting here in France with Bastille Day celebrations. How is it all being covered in the papers?
There's a bit of a shadow hanging over festivities this year. They come just a couple weeks after the unrest sparked by the police killing of 17-year-old Naël. We can take a look at France's left-wing paper, Libération. You can see their front page today focusing on not the national holiday, but rebuilding after that unrest. This photo shows the remains of a library in the eastern city of Metz that was burnt down. Altogether, over 750 public buildings were damaged. Now, a law aimed at accelerating reconstruction is going to be debated by French lawmakers starting next week. And in their editorial today, Libération is pleading with politicians to see this violence and destruction not as rioting, but rather as a revolt, actions really expressing anger and unease that politicians need to address. Now, the response in some areas has been to cancel Bastille Day fireworks. There's also going to be a very heavy police presence on the streets. And one Paris suburb, Le Blanc-Ménil, has gone so far as to cancel the city's main summer activities for families. Now, the city's right-wing mayor says that it's to pay for the damage caused by the riots, but Libération reports here that residents really see it as a form of collective punishment for the actions of just a small group of young people. Punishment that the paper points out is harming the majority of the city's families that don't actually have the money to go on a real vacation. So the city's activities would have been all that they had. Those are now canceled. Meanwhile, we can also take a look at France's right-wing paper, Le Figaro. Their editorial today is really lamenting the fact that this national holiday is a muted one this year. They call it here a couvre-fête, which is a play on words with couvre-feu or curfew. So basically a covered or a toned down party. The paper writes that it's a worrying sign of a country incapable of giving itself a dignified celebration, in their words. Now, the Figaro on their front page today is also focusing on the fact that Emmanuel Macron is not going to be giving a speech today. Now, that's after he made a promise during the unrest a couple months ago during the retirement reform that there would be 100 days of healing leading up to the national holiday. Now, Le Figaro points out that those 100 jours, those 100 days, are now up and they haven't ended so well. A poll for Le Figaro found that 78% of people think that Macron failed to carry out his objective of calming down tension in the country. 65%, meanwhile, so also the majority, think that the Prime Minister, Elisabeth Borne, should be replaced.
Meanwhile, Alison, the main festivities on the Champs-Élysées are going forward with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi being honoured as the special guest today. Just tell us how exactly that is being covered in some of the papers.
Well, Modi's presence isn't going over quite so well in the French press. Le Monde here calling him an unavoidable, controversial partner. They note that Modi has come a long way. He was once banned in the U.S. over his alleged complicity in anti-Muslim pogroms that saw over 1,000 people killed back in 2002. But recently he was welcomed in Washington. Now he's being welcomed in Paris. According to Le Monde, we're now in a moment of no-shame Hindu nationalism. Meanwhile, Indian paper The Hindu is pointing out that as Modi arrived yesterday, the European Parliament in Strasbourg passed a resolution calling on the Indian government to protect religious minorities in Manipur. Now, that is a remote state in the Himalayas that's seen deadly clashes between Christian and Hindu groups since early May. According to The Hindu, India reacted quite strongly to that resolution, calling it unacceptable and reflective of a colonial mindset.
Staying in India, Alison, it's set to launch a rocket to the moon later on Friday. Tell us what's happening there.
The Hindustan Times is calling this a moonshot moment for India. They are hoping to become just the fourth country, along with the US, the former Soviet Union, and China, to land a spacecraft on the surface of the moon. This is India's Chandrayaan-3 rocket, meaning mooncraft in Hindi. I'm not sure if I pronounced that very well. It's an unmanned mission, so no humans on board, just a landing module with a rover. It's going to take off actually in just a few hours, but the moon landing is not scheduled until August 23rd. Now, that is going to be the tricky part because India's last moon mission in 2019 successfully went into orbit, but then it had a crash landing. So cross your fingers today, but also later in August.
Well, from the moon to the stars, Alison, Hollywood actors have joined writers on strike, the first time in over 6 decades, and a hero has already emerged from the fledgling movement. Tell us about that.
Well, she is someone that you might recognize if you were a fan of 1990s sitcom The Nanny. I certainly was. This is star Fran Drescher. She's the head of the Screen Actors Guild. She gave a fiery speech as they kicked off their movement. It's been getting a lot of praise on social media. One user commented, "The studios have made many weird choices, but the weirdest might just be pissing off a Queens woman with an iconically forceful voice." Fran Drescher is known for her New York accent. I can show you one of my favorite responses on Twitter. This is from writer Jordan Hoffman. He points out that the last time the Screen Actors Guild went on strike along with the Writers Guild at the same time, well, the leader of the Screen Actors Guild was Ronald Reagan. You've heard of him. Therefore, we can conclude perhaps that Fran Drescher is soon going to be the president of the United States of America.
Might not be a bad option, Alison. Finally, from you, a giant family reunion of sorts has been taking place in the Scottish Highlands.
That's right, Sharon. This was a mass meeting of golden retrievers. You could think of it as a family reunion or a homecoming of sorts. Metro explains that the ancient house that you see behind the dogs here was where the first golden retriever puppies were born 150 years ago. Newsweek had a video of this reunion that they posted on Twitter. We can take a look at that. This gathering included dogs and owners from across the world, as far away as North America, Australia, and Japan. The event apparently included a nighttime procession, as well as talks and workshops. I have to say the dogs and the owners looked like they had a good time. Lots of wagging there.
Alison, thank you so much for that. That is Alison Sargent joining us with our press review